What's up everyone, we're back with some more Pokemon content to wrap up the month of November. Everyone here at Subjectively has been playing Sword and Shield pretty much non-stop since its release, and with every new generation of Pokemon, we've been really enjoying the 100 or so new designs that have been introduced into the world. From Gigantamaxes to Galarian forms, Gen 8 has really redefined what can be considered a Pokemon design. Every generation offers new ideas and methods of execution for visualizing those concepts, but Sword and Shield in particular has broken a lot of the conventions of designs that we're used to seeing in our Pokemon games. Is that a good or a bad thing? Well, it's really up to you to decide for yourself. I think that with every new game there are winners, and there are, well, Pokemon that I don't like.
You suck!
But of course, that's all subjective. What can't be denied, however, is that you can clearly tell the difference between a Pokemon designed in 2019 and a Pokemon designed in 1995. Dramatic changes in art style are to be expected in a franchise that's been around for as long as Pokemon. And while some people complain that Game Freak has run out of ideas, to me it feels like the exact opposite. I mean, yeah, I guess you could say that a teapot haunted by a poltergeist is lazy, but let's not forget that in the first generation we had a Pokemon that was literally a rock with arms. To me, the concepts behind these designs have gotten more complex and more thought out, and that yields many interesting and polarizing Pokemon designs. Now, with all that said, what about the original artwork of Pokemon is so different from the modern look of the games? Well, outside of the different style of rendering with the traditional watercolors and ink, I think the biggest difference from Gen 1 to Gen 8 is the level of complexity in the concepts behind each Pokemon, and how those concepts show through in their designs. So today, I thought it might be fun to look at a few of the new Pokemon from Gen 8 and redesign them as they would have looked if the same concepts had been developed back in 1995, and how different that would make them look. I want to disclose right off the bat that this is not to say that any of the designs I pick are poorly designed or even that I don't like them. This is just a fun exercise to help you guys think more about concept development behind character design and the different ways that you can represent those concepts through your final illustration. Some of my favorite Pokemon are from Gen 1, and I know that goes for a lot of other people too, so please don't think I'm calling anyone's favorite Pokemon poorly designed. Unless your favorite Pokemon is Raticate. So let's begin, shall we? I've selected 4 Pokemon from Sword and Shield to reimagine with the level of concept development and rendering style of Ken Sugimori back in 1995. I hope you enjoy them. Let's start off with the Water-type starter Pokemon, Sabo. Now, we could compare Sabo to Squirtle, the Water-type starter from Gen 1, but for this drawing I referenced the original artwork of Poliwag. Why? Well, let's talk a little about concept. The concept behind a character will inform its design based off of personality, abilities, and in this case, elemental powers and things of that nature. The 3 original starter Pokemon all had rather simple concepts behind their designs. The inspiration for Squirtle's design was mostly visual, a baby turtle, with some influence from mythological creatures like the Kappa or the Minigami. Sabo, on the other hand, has a concept based more around its personality, matched with an animal that could reflect that personality. A shy, emotional chameleon that turns invisible when frightened. I believe that if Sabo was designed in Gen 1, it would look more like it was based around a physical concept, in this case a tadpole or some sort of baby salamander. So I simplified its design significantly to match that concept. Simplicity is also key with all of these designs, as they would be reinterpreted as pixel art in a 16-bit game. They need it to be easy enough to recognize as a small, pixely sprite. This design has a very different feel from the Sabo we know today, but hey, that's to be expected from a design that's supposed to look 23 years old. Next, let's up the complication factor. One of the more unique and very complex designs in Sword and Shield is Grimsnarl, the final form of Impidimp. Something like this would have never existed back in Red or Green. A big part of the concept behind its design would be lost if you couldn't see the animation of its hair unraveling around its arms. But there are some fairly complicated designs in Gen 1, like Nidoking, for example. One of the most ambitious Pokemon designs of its time, with plate armor, spikes, claws, and horns all packed into one tiny sprite. But again, the concept behind its design is far more physical, based off of animals like gorillas, rhinos, dinosaurs, and maybe even the kaiju Baragon. Grimsnarl, on the other hand, is the final form of a devious imp, who is transcended from prankster menace to deceitful assassin to a deific demon overlord with a Gigantamax that's even more imposing. But without 3D character animation to convey its iconic hair muscle abilities, I believe that Grimsnarl would look more like Nidoking if it was designed back in 1995. More of a generic ogre demon without any overlapping design components that wouldn't translate into a small sprite. I also included some iconic design elements that a lot of Gen 1 Pokemon have, like the triangle ears and angry eyes. It was kind of a unifying design choice made by the art team that helped separate the look of Pokemon from similar franchises. The third Pokemon I chose was one of my favorite from Gen 8's. Dragapult has a few concepts behind its design that seem like they would clash, but they're actually all blended together in a really cool way. Its physical look reflects prehistoric salamanders like the Diplocaulus, as well as stealth fighter jets, which ties into the ghost type, stealthy like a ghost, which also ties back into its prehistoric salamander side, as its Pokédex entry states that it is quite literally the ghost of a prehistoric Pokemon. This is another design that could really only exist in the modern day, as a huge part of its design is based around the missile launchers on its head, that are actually housing two of its first form, Dreepy, that it launches as part of its signature move. It would be nearly impossible to convey all of that in a Game Boy game with the limitations of its graphics, so I looked at the only other third stage Dragon-type Pokemon in the game to help inform my design. Dragonite, interestingly enough, also draws inspiration from salamanders, but is far more simplistic in its rendering than Dragapult. So I basically stripped it of all of its excess that wouldn't translate into a monochromatic 16-bit game. I also limited its palette to only 2 colors. Most Gen 1 Pokemon were either 1 or 2 colors with black decals and white highlights. Things like its translucent tail and its Dreepy missiles had to go, but I tried to keep the Diplocaulus influence. I think that much would have remained the same. Finally, I picked one of the least Pokemon-looking Pokemon in all of the franchise. Eternatus is one of the legendary Pokemon from Gen 8, and is something that no one would have ever imagined existing in a Pokemon game back in the 90s. The rarest and most powerful legendary in Gen 1 was Mewtwo, and while their designs are really not similar at all to one another, I designed Eternatus as if it would play a role similar to the role Mewtwo plays in Gen 1, not because I think that they're similar in design. The legendaries in Gen 1 compared to the legendaries from the last few generations are completely different. We have 3 elemental birds that could not be less subtle with their concepts behind their designs, and 2 fetuses, which actually have some of the most complicated and interesting concepts behind any Pokemon in the history of the games. With that in mind, I threw out almost everything about how Eternatus looks in Gen 8, and started from scratch, as if I was designing the Harbinger of the Apocalypse in a being of pure energy in the first generation of Pokemon. Its design would be less abstract and way less complicated, and as much as I enjoy the look of Eternatus, it really baffled me when I first saw it, because nothing, not even the Ultra Beasts, were as crazy as that thing. I retained its floating nature and some aspects of its color scheme, but I made it far more humanoid, as that seemed to be a key factor in representing power in Gen 1. Most of the strongest Pokemon stand upright with arms, legs, and somewhat anthropomorphic bodies. This was a really big challenge for me, so let me know what you guys think. What do you think Eternatus would have looked like in Gen 1? Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you think of my redesigns, and which one was your favorite. Which Pokemon from Gen 8 would look the most different in Gen 1, and why? Anyway, thanks for watching, don't forget to throw me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.